So to worship, we just read about, is a way to acknowledge and honor whatever is worthy of our attention. The principle that I think is most relevant to what I want to share this morning is our third principle. You know, the UA is in the process of making some changes, but at least for now, our principles and purposes remain. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. We've got 7 different things. It begins with, of course, inherent worth and dignity of every person. But the third one is that we have covenanted to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. I think that's what we're doing this morning. You're accepting me and you're encouraging my spiritual growth by coming and listening, by providing witness and feedback. So that's a way that we do that for one another, is by being willing to hear where we are on the journey and what we want to share. And hopefully sometimes what I share might spark a growth or a learning for someone else too. So I thank you all for your attention this morning. My normal practice when I do a talk is to do a little trick I heard about a long time ago, where there's 3 tools to help me stay organized and to help you retain more of what you hear. And that is to begin by telling you what I'm going to tell you, and then telling you, and then at the end telling you what I told you. It's a little harder today because this is more of a rambling thing, but what I intend is to share a little bit of my own experience as a mother and with mothering. And then I have brought 8 different books. We won't get to all of them probably, but 8 different books that I want to share little bits, ideas or excerpts or just little snippets from, about tools that have been helpful to me in my journey of growing as a mother and as a person, a journey of learning to care not only for others, but for myself. And then at the end, we have a reading to maybe bring it back together about what is the mission of our faith. So that's telling you what I'm going to tell you. And now let me start by sharing the personal experience part. And this I didn't plan out. I couldn't decide. So I thought, see what spirit moves me this morning. Alicia inspired us to do that next week. So our talk this morning is who mothers you? I had forgotten this some months ago when we were looking at programming. We looked at the fact that this is a holiday weekend and it's usually a fairly low attendance. So we don't like to invite a guest speaker because we don't want to have a guest speaker come in 5 people. So, you know, it's just kind of rude. So I said, well, I'll do something. And I'd forgotten about it. But when I was reminded a couple of weeks ago, it's like, it was right at Mother's Day time. And I thought, that's just the first thing that came to my mind that I thought was interesting. Who mothers you? And so I had fun with going back to my bookshelf and pulling out lots of books about women and women's spirituality and goddesses and fun stuff. But I was texting my daughters. We have a 4-way thread that we've had going a couple of years. And even if we don't touch base during the day, we always say good night. My middle daughter works at night, so I sleep better after I get the text if she's home. So I had texted that I was going to be sharing and what the topic was. And my oldest daughter texted back and said, who mothers you? It's like, oh, okay. So I went a little deeper than just kind of a generic into looking at myself and my own story with that. And my answer was, I have many caring, wonderful friends and family that I'm able to accept love and care from. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm a mother myself. We all had different life journeys. Mine was such that I learned early to be self-reliant. I don't trust anybody else to make everything okay better than I trust myself. So I've learned to mother myself. But that has included, I've shared with y'all my journey about positive thinking. When I first encountered positive thinking 30 years ago, it literally changed my life. I had somebody who wanted me to sell ambulance. loaned me a book about the magic of thinking big. And it had all these exercises in it where, when you go into a room, instead of sitting down in the back and looking around and see if anybody's noticed you, you'll sit on the front row and speak to 3 people around you. Just little experiments, challenges, the things that you could try. And I did. And my life changed. I mean, just by behaving in a positive, open manner, people responded to me. And I was so much more comfortable. But I noticed I could do that and I could feel so good. And then I would still occasionally get down. And I would have to talk myself up into coming back. And I'd have to reframe it. I'd have to do all this mental work to get back to that space of being outgoing and loving and positive again. And I figured out some years into therapy, life experiences, that what I was doing was I was trying to shortcut. I was trying to step over the negative, the unpleasant parts. And that what I really had to do was acknowledge they were there. Because if you keep repressing, they just keep coming back in different ways, the issues that need to be dealt with. And so, similar to with positive thinking, my attitudes about mothering and being vulnerable, being open to other people. I needed to do have done a little bit of just acknowledging that there have been those things in my life, not just step over them, but to acknowledge and to sit with and to let it be what it is. And it's strange how when you stop repressing it, it just comes to light. You don't have to go there. It's like Alicia shared last week. Some of you were here and saw the little cartoon about how to deal with big feelings. We're the pond, and these feelings are the fish that come through, and we can notice, but we don't have to inhabit and be that again. We can be the pond and notice the feelings and learn from them. So, mothering. I mother myself, and one of the big tools in that journey was Course in Miracles. Most of you have heard me talk about it and know that I am a student of A Course in Miracles. One of the big learnings from Course in Miracles is still duality, but it's talking about most of the time we're coming from either love or fear. Anytime you come at me and you're not open and loving, there's something fearful going on. You're defending, you're angry, it's either love or fear. And looking at the world that way helps me not to take offense. It's about you. And even if something I've done has set it off, my part is just to put it out there as lovingly as I can. And if it's misunderstood, to be open to hearing, but I don't have to make myself guilty or bad or wrong. I want to stay in a space of love, not just for all of you, but for me too, to be as tender and gentle as I can in all my interactions. So I try to mother myself that way, not by all this negative self-talk most of us learn to do. You try to do better, I move much better through life when I remember to just take a breath, let it go, be where I am now and do the best I can. So if I'm going to get to some of those 8 books I wanted to tell you about, let me move on to Succulent Wild Woman. So this is a book that a friend gave me for my birthday in 2001 by Sark. If you don't know Sark, look him up. It's marvelous. And everything in here is all handwritten and colored. But the part that I'll share with you is just this little tiny tidbit. She talks about being a succulent, wild woman, open to her own self and her urges. And this is one of her definitions. The succulent person is bursting with juices, stories, animations, ideas, and love. The dry person looks sideways and says, "Who do you think you are?" So her little cartoon drawing is, these are the people that you use your umbrella to shield yourself. And then she ends this page with a quote. "If you ask me what I came into this world to do, I will tell you, I came to live out loud." Emile Zola said that. And then the next source I want to share with you, this is the book I was talking about, Dee. You won't remember it, but it's called In Wisdom's Path. And it has lots of great poems in it. But it was given to me in 2001, the year you were vice president and I was president. And this is the book that you gave me as a little president's thank you at the end of the year. And it has lots of wonderful collage, pictures of her collages and poetry that she's written. So in this, a lot of the book is called In Wisdom's Path. And she personifies wisdom. And you see what you think of it. And then I'll tell you what I do. But I'll read 2 pages from here. Come to wisdom with all your soul, and keep her ways with all your might. Search out and seek, and she will become known to you. And when you get hold of her, do not let her go, for at last you will find the rest she gives, and she will be changed into joy for you. And this is her prologue to the whole book. I don't sacrifice animals to her. I don't take secret oaths vowing allegiance to her. I have not pledged my firstborn child to her or told anybody they were going to hell if they didn't believe in her. She's a big girl. She doesn't need this from me. She is secure enough in herself to know that people will seek her of their own longing and will honor her in their own ways. She wears myriad disguises, most of which I'll never know. But sometimes I glimpse her in the faces I encounter, dark, pale, wrinkled, smooth, laughing, weeping, aching, crying out for healing and for peace. She was there at the dawn of creation. She played and danced as the world unfolded, very good at amusing herself while the rest of us are busy debating so very seriously and arguing so hurtfully. She will weep while we tear each other to shreds, and then she will help tend the wounded on all sides. She will bite her tongue and refrain from calling us all the names we've called one another. She has a special place in her heart for fools. They will find a seat at her table and will eat of the feast and drink of the wine she prepares. I think of her now and then. Imagine her biting her time with a cup of tea as she looks out her window, or walking down a dusty road with a small child, or appearing in a fevered dream that will not be remembered, but will only leave the dreamer with the sense of having been visited. She's fierce, but gracious. She will not force her way into our midst, but once invited, will accompany us as tenaciously as a mother bear does her cub. She will wait outside the city gates as long as it takes, as long as the arguments over her rage, as long as brave souls hazard conversations with her through chinks in the city walls, as long as there are those who risk breathing her name. And when she returns, she will bring with her the others who were outcast, who were lost, who were expelled because of the way they looked, or how they acted, or what they believed, or whom they loved. When she returns, she will bring them dancing into the city, singing in the streets, celebrating in the most sacred places because she has returned. She and those who loved her, without even knowing her name, all through her long, long exile from home. We can talk about what you think of that. For me, I'm comfortable with the Holy Spirit, but she's calling it wisdom. The goddesses. We'll get into too much of that, but this is another beautiful book with lots of illustrations of different goddesses. And the one that comes to mind about mothering for me is Kuan Yin. And it is a beautiful illustration of the goddess Kuan Yin, who is revered in some Buddhist circles. She's Chinese, but she's also revered in Japan and other countries. She is honored as the Holy Mother of compassion and mercy. She personifies boundless compassion and loving kindness. Another one of the books that I referred, but I'm not going to read from, Goddesses in Older Women, Shinoda Bowen, says that her name, Kuan Yin, actually translates to she who hearkens to the cries of the world. So the goddess Kuan Yin is one of the many female personifications of what we might call out to, whether we call it goddess, goddess within, spirit within. The story is told that Kuan Yin was a real person who lived in China, and that she was so loving and merciful. When she reached the gates of heaven, she was instantly made into a saint and invited to come in, but she heard someone crying behind her and walked in the world. So she asked permission to return until everyone could come with her. And that is the definition of a bodhisattva, someone who is here for everyone and doesn't take just selfish relief. The bodhisattva vow, get my cards back in order here and tell you that. So the bodhisattva vow, according to the lady who wrote the Goddesses and Older Women, as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. So she's a bodhisattva. I'm not going to quote at length about from Starhawk, although I think many of you are familiar. I became familiar with Starhawk when I was planning my croning ceremony when I turned 50, 23 years ago. And this is my croning dress that I got out for the occasion that I wore that night. But one thing that I'll share that I was reminded of when I was rereading some of Starhawk's work, it was Dreaming of the Dark, was the book I was looking at. And she talks about how she does these workshops with people who want to look at these different ideas of women's spirituality and opening to the mystery. And that sometimes she'll ask, would you like a vision of the goddess? And if people nod, she tells them to look at the person nearest you. Look at the woman and the man. Turn around and look right now. Look at somebody. Anybody close by. You have a vision of the goddess and the god. We are one another's brothers and keepers. Okay, so Women, Food, and God. This is a very interesting book, and I'll loan it to you if you want to know more. It was published 10, 12 years ago by Jennifer Ross. And she's got a lot of good stuff to share. But what I'm going to read for you is a little excerpt from page 16, where she talks about pre-verbal experiences. And she's taught a lot of retreats all around the world. So she's learned that each of us has a basic view of reality and God that we act out every day in relationship with friends, with families, and with food. Doesn't matter whether you believe in one God, many gods, no God. Anyone who breathes, she says, and thinks and experiences has beliefs about God. And since mothering is our first pre-verbal template for an existence in which we feel welcomed or rejected, loved or abandoned, many of us have used our relationships with our mothers into our concepts about God. Her suggestion is to discover what you really believe, pay attention to the way you act. Become more self-observant. Notice what triggers and brings things up to you. And then she goes on further in the book. I'll flip over to page 90, where she talks about a tool that was very helpful for her. And the one she did was a diamond approach. It's a version of inquiry, a philosophical, scientific, psychological, spiritual process that's been around in various forms for thousands of years. But basically, when things come up, when the big fish, the big feeling comes through, sit with it. You don't have to engage, you don't have to argue, you don't have to defend, you don't have to, control and figure out this, relax and let it be. Let it see some light and some air. And just be gentler with ourselves. And oftentimes we do experience a changed feeling about it. We can see something differently in it, but it doesn't have to be so much work. We can be gentler with ourselves in the process. is one of the big messages I got. I feel like I'm hurrying through because I want to get to all of these. Oops. Can't leave my notes in the book. I need to the next thing. Which brings me into another question I wanted to share. You know, there's several quotes of I don't remember now who I attributed the quote to, but I'll share it with you anyway. One of the most important questions I think that anyone can ask themselves is the universe friendly? If you believe you have to protect yourself, everybody's out for what they can get, that the universe is not basically friendly, that's the experience you're going to have. Whereas if we're able to move over to a basic understanding that it really is, what I want is there when I need it, what I need is there when I need it. The universe is friendly and supportive. And of course, most of us would say, well, I'm neutral. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But you have a predisposition. And the more you can be disposed to expect the good, to think it's going to be happy, the more likely you're going to see that. More of your experience will be that way. So noticing is the universe friendly, and then just noticing, sitting with when things come up, not repressing, but trying to move forward. And one of the last excerpts that I do want to share with you, this is from a little book that was written by Jane Ellen Malden, and I guess she's a UU. This is published by Skinner Books, the UUA publishing line. And again, it's an example of, to me, how we are one another's keepers and how we have an opportunity to love and care, not just for those close to us, but for all. This is a little essay she wrote called Wakeful Nights, and it is specifically about human mothering. My wakeful nights are fewer now that my children are growing older, but a recent event reminded me of what I'm missing. After a tremendously exciting weekend in another state at a family celebration, my young son and I found that our sleep schedules were not in sync. On the way home, he slept in the plane, the car, and then he was awake in his room from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. Meanwhile, I was completely, utterly, absolutely exhausted. My husband joined me in physical oblivion because he had spent the weekend at home caring for our baby daughter who missed her mother. Also, he had an old back injury, rumbling. So he was also drugged. He lay drugged on his back with ice in great pain. It felt like 1,001 nights that night. Each time I fell asleep, my son called out. He was disturbed, afraid, and insecure. After that intense weekend of traveling and meeting new people, I grew grumpier and grumpier, padding through a sleeping household to reassure and calm my wakeful child. I felt alone and adrift, aware that I alone could help this child who called out to me, and yet feeling desperately needy myself. I spent the next day with my eyes open, yet with brain cells barely functioning. Although exhausted, I slowly recalled a truth that helped me to carry on. As I trudged alone through the night always, I staggered to a call as old as humankind. That night and every night, mothers and fathers around the world awakened to reassure restless children. That night and every night, grown children arise to calm, fitful, aging parents. Those night hours are long and lonely. Our burdens and tired bones are ours alone to bear. There are, however, other people out there who are waking, even as we are. There are other people who bear similar burdens, whether it's simply to reassure a child for one night or to help a dying loved one reach peace week after week until the end. We who rise do so because we choose to do it. It is an intense physical duty. It is also an honor, as ancient as human love. We are part of a circle of families and friends who nurture life from its earthly beginning until its earthly conclusion. And then she has also written a short prayer of caregiving. May the burden of caring not feel so heavy, as I remember all who have gone before me and all who will come after me. May I know myself to be part of a great dance that circles and comes round again. I give thanks for the privilege of caring. I'm home. I'm home. The last example I'll just tell you about, not read. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Eric Fromm's Art of Loving. In the Art of Loving, he talks about motherly love, but it was an illustration I've not heard before. He talks about the biblical reference to the land of milk and honey, flowing with milk and honey, and says that one interpretation is the milk, is the nurturance, the physical sustenance that we do to keep younger children alive. We're responsible if we're mothering or parenting them. But the honey is an additional instruction we're given. Not literally feed them honey, that can be toxic in the first year particularly, but to teach them sweetness, to teach them to enjoy the good in life. That's the honey. The milk, we got to keep them alive. That's the primary job. But we also want to share for wherever we are, as much as we've been able to acquire about how good life is and the sweetness of life. And obviously, we have less ability. Some of us have more and less ability at different stages. But that was another one. I'm neglected to say in talking about my own experience that I'm very fortunate that my mother and I worked through so many issues in her lifetime. And I was blessed the last 7 months of her life when she lived with me to be able to accept the mothering she could give and to come to terms. And because I've loved her always, but I was blessed to have that opportunity at the end of her life to appreciate her and to accept what mothering she could offer. I'm grateful for that. If you will, pick up your hymnal again and let's read together number 459. So back of the hymnal. 459. This is the mission of our faith. To teach the fragile heart of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we have told the whole world in our hands. May it be said. And so now is the time of the service that we operate. So I'll start this.